On Let's Talk Leadership, we've been looking at adaptive leadership, and following a conversation with Jeneva Patterson, we've broken it down into some of the fundamental components. And the other conversations we've had have been around the dance floor on the balcony, have been around dancing on the edge, and now we're going to look at something called experimental mindset. Just some of the basic sort of fundamentals of the adaptive leadership framework. As always, joining us is Jeneva. Hi, Jeneva. Great to see you. So tell us about experimental mindset. What's it all about?
Okay. So as it says, right, when you're working with an adaptive leadership challenge, there may not be, and there often isn't, an obvious response to, okay, well, what do we do now, right? Even defining a problem can be problematic. So an experimental mindset means that you actively commit to a leadership choice, right? You're full on devoted to seeing if your behavior, if your action, if your strategy is going to work. Yeah. And if you do that, recognizing that it's an experiment and a choice means that if something happens and it doesn't work out, you're not so wedded to it. You're not overly invested in it as a person, right? As an individual, that if something doesn't work, everything falls apart. Your mindset is such that, okay, so I'm going to test this. Let's see, right? Let's give it a little try. And if it doesn't work, then we can course correct very quickly because you have that experimental mindset. If your attempt at leadership doesn't work out, then your ego isn't so tied up in it that you can't learn from those mistakes, right? Leadership is very much about learning, constantly learning in the micro and the macro moments of your life, right? So think about Thomas Edison. He's such a great example that we can use. He was experimenting his whole life. His art and his work was about experimentation, right? Yep. And he was actually investigating other things when he made his most important discoveries, and the one for which he's most known. So essentially, experimentation is about learning, and leadership in an adaptive framework is about learning on the go. You interpret, you see what happens, you act again. Interpret, make your diagnostic, right? The best diagnostic you can with the tools that you have and the awarenesses that you have. You act and you see what happens. It's about having a full conviction that you're on the right track, but at the same time, imagine at the very same time, knowing that you might change directions. And that is embracing ambiguity.
So you've got to be quite courageous in a sense, because what you're really saying is you've got to be prepared to change course or to look at something totally different in a new way. You've got to be prepared to admit that maybe something that you've started to do isn't working, and maybe you've perhaps failed to look at other opportunities or possibilities. Maybe you've failed to involve people that were not even on your radar screen that perhaps you should have done with hindsight. So it's quite a courageous thing to have an experimental mindset.
It is, Matthew. I agree with you, because it means that by definition, you're open to you and the people who are with you making mistakes. And in so many of our cultures, making mistakes is bad, right? Oh my gosh, I made a mistake. Wait, what kind of negative repercussion because I've made a mistake? But in fact, if you're open to that, to the learning and being courageous to say, yeah, I made a mistake. Okay, now I know what doesn't work, right? And it's about that reinvention almost constantly on the go. That's experimentation. And we are all doing that now, right? And Edison, for example, was distinguished. He was praised for his ability to deal with complex change. And in fact, so many of his inventions and his patents, right, over 1,000, were because of him progressively trying new things in ever increasing complex environments, and then having the courage to do that, especially because he was bullied, he was belittled, he was teased, right? He was called a charlatan, but he kept on going. And now look what we owe him, right? In terms of the innovation and what we do now as human beings in our world.
Yeah. So great. Thanks for explaining that. So experimental mindset, we've got 2 more to go, which we'll explain in coming weeks. But Jeneva, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much.